Morning. I am Miguel Garcia III, the student minister here at First Temple. And if I haven't had a chance to meet you, come and say hi down at the welcome booth after the service, and I'd love to shake your hand and just get to chat a little bit. But I am kicking off a new service, a new series these next 3 Sundays called Jesus Questions. So all throughout the Gospels, his disciples ask him questions, and Jesus responds sometimes with another question. And he doesn't respond with another question because he's like playing with them or upset with them, but he actually asks them another question to help them understand the bigger picture of what he actually wants them to understand. And so this morning we're going to be looking at Jesus with the disciples in the boat. But before we get there, I want us to look at a picture I have for us. So this is a picture that I love, a very dear picture. It's with people that I care about a lot. And I don't know if you can actually see, but that's just a small picture. Can we step back a little bit and let's look at the whole thing? There we go. All right, so it's my son, Miguel Garcia IV, right there, and Lauren Garcia and myself. And so we have another one on the way, Mateo Garcia, and he should be here July 19th. So if he's not here by then, he's getting evicted. And so we are going to make sure he comes out. Lauren wishes he was out yesterday, so it's all good. But I got another picture for us to look at, which is this picture right here. So it's another picture I really enjoy. I just found it on a Google search, and I don't know if you can't really see what it is. So let's see the bigger picture. Let's see the full picture. Here's Jesus embracing a fellow believer who has given their life to him, and this is Jesus having a huge grin, a huge smile, because he's so excited for what has happened. And so the disciples asked Jesus questions because they wanted to know some answers, and in response, Jesus asked them a question to get a deeper view, a deeper meaning of what they actually needed to hear. A little disclaimer this morning: I really want this message this morning. I'm glad you're here today. It's not by accident that you're in this room this morning, but I really want us to listen. And I don't want this message that we're about to hear to be shameful to anyone in here, to guilt anyone. But we are going to be talking about some pretty heavy things. We are going to be discussing past trauma. We're going to be talking about anxiety and fear and worry, and what do we do about it. And so I have my master's in marriage and family therapy, and so I love getting opportunities to share how to help us through these things, and how faith is actually able to heal some of these wounds that we have. So let's dive into, we're going to be in Mark chapter 4, but before we read that, we're going to be in verses 35 through 38. But before we dive in, let me give a little recap of what's happened before. In Mark chapter 3, Jesus finally collects his 12 disciples. So he finally has them all. He's been collecting them, and he's been performing miracles in front of them. Some of the miracles that he performed were healing a demon-possessed man. He healed people all night long at Simon and Andrew's house. He healed a man with leprosy. And then, of course, if you weren't raised in church, he healed this man who was brought down through the roof by some friends that really wanted to get their friend close to Jesus. And the house was too packed, so they actually tore a hole in the roof and brought him down. So if you hadn't heard about that, go read it. It's awesome. It's right before this happens. And so here we get to Jesus trying to help them understand some things, because then after all these miracles, he begins to teach them about a lampstand that shouldn't be covered up, and he begins to talk about seeds and faith and how the church grows and how faith grows. And then there were a few who had difficulty understanding Jesus' teaching, so he decided, hey, it's time for a little field trip. And I want to give you a pop quiz. He's given them the answer. They've seen Jesus care for everyone, every one of these people. And so let's jump into Mark chapter 4, verse 35 through 38. Let's read this together. That day, when evening came, he said to his disciples, "Let us go over to the other side." Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him, other boats there. In verse 37, a furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" That's the question they had for Jesus. Teacher, don't you care if we drown? The disciples did not have what we have today. We have the Weather Channel, right? We have apps on our phone that tell us when it's going to rain. It even tells us when the rain is going to stop. And so they didn't have that ability to do that. They didn't have the Bell County weather alert Facebook group to talk about weather. And of course, this new storm that we have coming in that gives a different alert every single day. And so we're trying to figure out where is it going, what's happening. Everyone is trying to figure out so that they can take cover and prepare, right? The disciples didn't have that. They just looked at the clouds and looked at the water and okay, I guess it's all right. If they would have had that, perhaps they might have said, Jesus, I might sit this one out because it says it's about to get really bad in the next 5 minutes. So I'd rather not go. Can I just stay here? And they might have missed out on something that Jesus was wanting to show them and teach them, something very valuable to them. And so they just obeyed and they trusted Jesus and they said, yes, let's go. The furious squall is a storm that comes out of nowhere. It's not predicted. They couldn't foretell it was going to be there. And the waves began to break over the boat, filling the boat with water, almost completely flooding it. They were seeing the other boats that were there. There were other boats that were also being tossed in this storm, and they began to be worried and stressed and scared and anxious and nervous, and adrenaline has probably began to kick in. And they're the fight, flight, freeze mode, and they begin to fight because they're like, we need to tell Jesus, hey, you need to wake up, dude. The disciples, for the first time, are experiencing these emotions with Jesus. They'd never experienced this with Jesus before. Before, it was just, hey, Jesus performed these miracles, and okay, let's go over here. We're going to go over here. Okay, let's help Jesus in these ways. And Jesus was doing all the teaching. Jesus was doing all the work. And in this moment, Jesus is trying to show them that he cares about everyone, just like he said. What's cool is Jesus is the kind of teacher that gives you the test beforehand, gives you the answers, and says, hey, this is the test. You can do this. I love teachers like that. They don't just say, read everything. You're not going to know what's on it. You got to know it all. Jesus is like, okay, listen, guys, I've walked you through this. You've seen me do this. You've seen me care for everyone. You see that I love those who are hurting and in need. They should have known that Jesus cared about them. But they forgot the answers. So they perhaps thought that now that they're with Jesus, the Messiah, that they were no longer going to experience things that this broken and sinful world experiences. That now they're going to share the experiences they have now with Jesus, that is a pain-free, worry-free life. And they're like, man, we're with the Messiah now. Dude, this is going to be awesome. Let's do this. But here they are experiencing these negative emotions with Jesus now. And maybe they're kind of like, well, I don't get it, Jesus. This wasn't what we were supposed to, I didn't think this was part of the plan. It didn't make sense to them. We're your followers, Jesus. Shouldn't you care about us? Or don't you care? Well, storms are going to come if you follow Jesus or not. Let's look at where they come from. Where do storms come from? Storms entered into the world when sin entered into the world. Death, pain, and the ground became cursed in Genesis chapter 3. Everything is going to break one day. Everything is going to get worn out. Everything is going to be thrown away and into the landfill. Everything. Our shirt, our clothes. We want to get the newest phone. We got to get a new car. Everything is going to be worn out and put into the landfill. No matter how much new stuff we buy, it's always going to be outdated. It's not going to last, and we give it away, throw it away, or donate something. Because we live in a broken and sinful world. the ground has been cursed, and even the good things we try to do are going to war against us. That there's going to be thorns and thistles in the work that we're trying to do. And it says our friends may leave us. It might happen. Our children might rebel against us. Our marriages will be difficult. Before the fall of man, there were no storms, there was no anxiety or fear. One of the first major storms was with Noah in Genesis chapter 6. Genesis says that there had been a time that every inclination in man's heart was to do evil. So every day, when people would wake up, they'd say, all right, what evil thing could I do to disobey God? But not just to disobey God, but to harm my brother or sister or my friend or my neighbor. What evil thing could I do? Not just to myself, to God, to other people. That every inclination was an evil thought. What a horrible time to be alive. This was when God spoke to Noah, and he said, hey, Noah, there's going to be a storm that's going to come like you've never seen before, and I want you to build a boat like you've never seen before, and you're going to experience this, and you make sure you're in the boat because you're going to be safe as long as you're in the boat. So Noah was experiencing this great faith builder for him because Noah had never experienced a global storm like he was about to endure, but he wasn't going to experience it alone. Storms are going to come. Make sure that you're in his boat when it does. Not only do we experience natural storms that everyone can see, right? The storm that's coming, we know that it's coming. It's all over the news, it's all over Facebook. We'll probably see clouds. We'll see the wind. We'll feel the rain and all of that. So some storms are very visible. But I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk about storms that maybe no one sees. Maybe you're the only one that sees it. You're the only one that feels the rain and the wind when the storm is there. These storms that I'm talking about are some emotional storms that we experience that come along with natural storms of life. Worry, fear, anxiety entered the world along with sin. The fear of not being in control or trying to control what we can't. I've personally experienced how the body of Christ is affected when its members act in fear. This is where a lot of church hurt can come in. I'll talk a little bit about that later in my message. But trauma is the result of a storm. It's pain because of an experience that we've had. When we see something or experience something painful, it can impact our brain to believe we aren't safe. God created us that way, actually, to help us in moments where we don't need to be slow and rational. That the adrenaline comes in and we need to act quickly. So for instance, if you're driving down the highway and you see an 18-wheeler kind of swerving into your lane and you're like, oh no, and your adrenaline kicks in so you can slow down, speed up, get out of the way, right? You don't need to say, okay, hold on, wait a second. What do I need to do in this instance? No, God has given us the adrenaline to save us, to keep us from harm. It's actually a very good thing that we need when we need to act in a matter of seconds. However, there's something called post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. And it's in different levels of PTSD. It's when our brain is on high alert, scanning, looking for things that aren't safe. Scanning for things that are in the past, when we were in danger in the past, even when we've been removed from the danger and we're safe. Your brain is now scanning for something or someone who can hurt us. Anxiety is a learned trait that can be passed down through family members or someone close to us, usually someone who's experienced a traumatic event themselves. The way they speak about or catastrophize something can instill fear in someone else. So then they begin to scan for danger as well. For example, when you simply tell your kid, hey, you need to put on a helmet, totally good thing, you probably should, right? It'll keep you safe, awesome. But some of us maybe may catastrophize something and we say, well, you need to put on a helmet because if you don't put on a helmet and you're going to be going down the road, then you're going to fall off. And when you fall off, you're going to hit your head and there's going to be blood everywhere and we're going to have to call the ambulance. And when we call the ambulance, they're going to have to perform surgery and you may never ever be able to walk again. And we catastrophize these things. This poor child is just wanting to be safe and wear the helmet and have fun and enjoy their day. And yet sometimes we tend to instill these negative thoughts into people around us. Anxiety is a learned trait. We must be careful when those automatic negative thoughts come into our brain, because when we do, we stop experiencing life the way we were designed. God has given us his Spirit to help with our fears and anxiety, a spirit of power, love, and self-control, not a spirit of fear. So church, if you are in here and you're in your seat right now and you're wrestling with anxiety or worry on a day-to-day basis, finding a Christian counselor who is trained to help you walk through this battle is a good thing. You're not meant to battle this alone. Counseling is simply one-on-one discipleship. Jesus' brother James says that we confess our sin to one another so we can be healed. What kind of sin or what kind of healing is he talking about when we confess the difficult things that we share, that we go through, that there's a spiritual, supernatural change, transformation in our brain when we share the struggles we're going through with one another, with a safe and trusted individual. Someone who has to know everything before it will happen. That's not reality. So, something I use to help people who are struggling with anxiety is an exercise that helps them refocus on the bigger picture. This exercise helps them transform their mind by being able to tell the difference between what they have control over and what they don't have control over. Because when you try to control something you don't have control over, that brings anxiety. All right, so let's find out what we have control over and what we don't. So I give them a list of scenarios, and I tell them, do you have full control over this? Are you fully in control? Do you have some control of the situation, or do you have no control? So total control, little cheat sheet. If it only involves you, you have total control of that thing. If it's just you. If you have some control if it involves you and someone else. So now there's someone else in the picture, and no control if it involves someone else outside of you, not a part of you and your decision-making ability. So let's go through some of these scenarios real quick. It'll help us. Let's see. If someone likes you, how much control do we have if someone likes you? Well, this one's kind of tricky. And this one only involves one person other than yourself. So it's not saying if you like yourself, it's saying if someone else likes you. You could be the nicest person in the world, aka Jesus, and still be hated. You could be kind and loving and affectionate and still be pushed away. But however, we could also be a negative person and the meanest person, and yet people still love us and care for us and welcome us. So in fact, man, we have no control if someone likes us. If we get in a fender bender, all right, we're in traffic, let's see, bumper to bumper traffic. If we get, let's see, okay, this one involves you and someone else in traffic. So we have some control. That already tells you that. There's two people. You can keep your eyes on the road, right? You can keep your hands on the wheel. You can make sure you're checking your mirrors, you're off your phone. However, we have no control over what the other person's doing, right? The other people, if they're on their phone, if they have had enough sleep, if they're falling asleep or whatever it is. But if we choose to have control over those people, that's called road rage, right? We're like, hey, you need to we're trying to control how they drive, or it's called manipulation when we're trying to force someone to like us. Not good. Not acting in the bounds that God has created us. And lastly, if you wake up on time, all right, that is you and you alone. So you have full control. If you set an alarm, if you wake up, you cannot blame someone else if you don't wake up on time. It is you. So I hope this is helpful as we navigate through some things. But when we believe we have total control of people liking us or others driving on the road, then we're trying to control things that only God is able to, and we're miserable, and we're difficult to be around. Sometimes we may even believe we don't have any control of our lives, which is also equally harmful. Another exercise I use to help my clients with anxiety is and the need for control is we read through Psalms 46. Psalms 46 is a very popular verse. It's not well known. There's only 2 verses that are well known. And so I want us to dive into this real quick. So let's jump into Psalms 46, verse 1 through 3. It says this. God is our refuge. He is our place we can go to for strength and ever-present help in trouble. He's always there, ever present. Even when we don't think he's there, he's there. He's helping us. Therefore, we will not fear. We're not going to fear. Though the earth, okay, why? When are we not going to fear? Though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, in verse 3. Though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging. So here's a picture of a natural disaster that's happening. And he's saying, we're not going to be afraid. We're not going to fear. That we know he is an ever-present help for us. He is with us. He is our refuge and our strength. So we will not fear even when the earth and the mountains fall into the sea. He has control over nature. Let's look at verses 6 through 9 together now. So he's out control over nature, but let's look at 6. He says, nations are in uproar, kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice, the earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us. He is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Come and see what the Lord has done, the desolations he has brought on the earth. And verse 9, he makes wars cease, and to the ends of the earth he breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. So now he's talking about people. We have no control over one another. And he's saying God is in control of these people who are mad at each other. There's sin that's going on, and he is going to end wars, and he's capable of doing these things. We aren't. So he's talked about natural disasters, things we have no control over, other people, things we have no control over. So Miguel, what do we do with the things we don't have control over? Well, that's when we get to the popular verses, because I wanted us to read the context of these two verses. You may have seen these on a coffee cup or Facebook post or something. Psalms 46, 10 through 11. And he says, be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. He's saying, be still. Stop trying to control these things you don't have control over. Stop. I'm God. You're not. I'm in control of the things you're not in control of. You're trying to control people because they've hurt you, but we can't. We're trying to control nature and shield ourselves from every storm that comes our way, but we can't. Remember, God is with us. He is your fortress. We are not in control of all things, and we're not the fortress. But we know who is. So we have to give it to him. So in order for us to give him control of things, we have to say, okay, God, I have to understand that I am not in full control of anyone outside of myself. So my children, my wife, my family, even sickness, I have to know I'm not in control of these things. That I can eat blueberries and work out 24/7. I hope y'all know that even that isn't going to prevent things if storms are going to come. And so I have to say, God, I give you my son. Because you know his future. You know his plans. You're the one that's capable of writing all this out for him. I cannot. My time with my son is limited, but not God's. Let's go back to finish the story of Jesus and the disciples on the boat, now that we've read these Psalms. Mark chapter 4, verses 39 says this. He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, ready? Quiet, be still. Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, why are you so afraid? Here is the question that Jesus answers the disciples to, don't you care about us? He says, why don't you believe I care about you? I've shown you I care about everyone. He wasn't anxious, he wasn't nervous, he wasn't scared. He got up and yelled, quiet, be still. He has authority and control. Of course he cares about the disciples and if they drown. The disciples were new to this, though, and they were trying to figure this out, that they were learning for themselves new things about Jesus. He said, I've shown you these things, all that I can do. Church, without storms, how would we grow? We would not need to trust in God. If you could think to yourself of all the storms you've experienced, you would be able to see the steps of faith that you had to endure, which made you the person you are today, the storms that have forced you to trust in him and made us closer to him. I want to share a personal story. I graduated from Wayland Baptist University, and I was just a fresh graduate, and I was just fearless. I was so excited for the plan God had for me, and I was the kind of guy that I was like, dude, I'm going to go wherever God sends me. I don't care how dangerous it is, and I was looking at churches in Detroit, Michigan, because I was like, I want to go wherever, God, and that church didn't work out. But he sent me to a specific place, and God knew what he was doing. I was there for 2 years, and the pastor and I were very close, and some things had began to happen, unfortunately, in the last few months that I was there. I began to experience church members yelling and lying about me in meetings. You see, there were church members that needed control, and they were afraid that they would no longer have control of their church. And the pastor resigned, my good friend. Then I soon resigned following after that, and every staff member, children's, missions. It was hard for me to walk through that, and I was working on my master's in marriage and family therapy at that time, and I thought, I'm just going to start doing that. And I'm never going to work in a church again because how traumatic it was to me. A little bit of PTSD there, different levels. If I went back into ministry, I told myself it would need to be God to tell me in a big way. Now, I was afraid of experiencing that again. No one prepared me for that. I was afraid of working with church members who were anxious, which in turn would make me anxious. That same pastor, who was a good friend of mine, asked me 2 questions. When are you going to go back into ministry? When are you going to do that? I know you're called, clearly. When are you going to go back? And what are you afraid of? And so Lauren and I were getting married at that time, and the town we moved into was a small town. And so I talked to the DOM, the director of missions, and I was like, hey, are there any part-time youth or worship positions? Like, I don't know. And so he said, well, there's a church, their pastor, their youth minister's leaving. Go check them out. So I had lunch with the pastor. On my way out, I saw the youth pastor. He said, hey, come to my last Wednesday night. I was like, sure. I didn't know what I was doing. And so I show up. Kids are coming up to me. Hey, are you going to be our new youth pastor? I was like, dude, I don't know, kid. Like, this is wild. I'm just here to see what's going on. I was just invited. And it was in that youth Wednesday night service that God relit the passion in me to go back into ministry. But not just a passion to go back into ministry, but an understanding that I had to face that I might be hurt by others in the church again, but he would be with me. That it didn't matter the storm I was in, he was going to be with me. This reminds us that he will be with us in the storms, even when things don't end up the way we want them to. He can still be trusted above all things because he cares about us. I'm going to close with this. I have a close friend who is a pastor and a storm chaser in Houston, Texas. And since I was talking about storms and going through storms and all this, I said, well, dude, I need to talk to him. How did you start chasing storms? I mean, you're chasing them. You're trying to figure out how they work, and you're in the middle of them. How did you start doing that? Why did you start doing that? And so he tells me that 7 years ago, there was a storm in Houston, and he was just on Facebook doing a Facebook Live video of his street that was getting flooded, and he's just sharing what he's seeing, wanting others to know so they could be safe, they could be aware of what's happening. And he tags a news station in Houston. The news station, because of all the views and all the comments and all the shares, the news station saw what was going on, so they called him and said, hey, we want to interview you in 30 minutes. So when the cameras all got there and they're ready to interview him, they just asked him, Jaime, can you please share with us what you experienced? Can you please share with us what you saw during the storm? What was going on? So what storms have you experienced? What storms that you've gone through is God wanting you to share your story of what you've seen and what you've experienced with others, because that's going to bring the healing. Every storm is a story of how God is helping us understand him better and his great love for us. Our struggles are not proof that Jesus doesn't care. They are opportunities for our faith to grow. To the question the disciples had, why don't you care? We're going to drown. Jesus said, why are you so afraid? You should know I care about you. God turns every storm into a story to be shared, and a story that brings healing to us. He does all of this for our good, so that at the end of our lives, he's able to reward us with hearing the words from our loving Father, well done, my good and not fearful, my good and faithful servant. Let us be reminded of those moments of when everything feels out of control. Who has control? And he says, be still and know that he is God and we are not. Let's pray. Father, I thank you for this morning and for this message you have for me, for all of us in this room. As things are crashing all around us, Father, that you are in the boat with us. You don't leave us. You're an ever-present help. That we have nothing to fear when the things are going on that we have no control over. So, Father, help us in this room to cling to your word, that we read the Psalms, we take this passage, that it's okay to have questions for you, Father. But help us to understand the storms are to drive us deeper into who you are. Help us understand this complicated thing. Be with us. Be with those who are in a storm right now. Again, the storms that people can't see. No one else knows